This week, I focused on wrapping up page 3 of episode 4. Over the last couple weeks, I took some time to focus on the shipwright's ship. It's important to have that established going forward, but the longer I spent on that, the more I could feel myself not working on the story. Part of the reason I introduced the character redesigns is that I find the designing process easier to talk about than the story creating portion. I have more of a language for it. But one of the big features of this project that has surprised me the most is just how much I'm being forced to learn. From new techniques to writing to 3D software, this project is pushing me in ways nothing else ever has. So in the spirit of growing, this video will be an opportunity for me to practice talking more intentionally about the story. My preference is usually for action or visual storytelling, but occasionally I'm going to have to create pages like this that are conversation. That's based on a preference that I have when reading comics. I'm typically not as much a fan when it feels like the story stops so characters can have a conversation, but the reality is it's necessary. So I'm going to try to do everything in my power to make sure it's not tedious. One of the ways that I can attempt to do that is through expressive faces. They say that 80% of human communication is body language. I would put facial expressions under that category as well. And while the dialogue is communicating a part of the story, I want the faces and gestures to be carrying just as much of that burden. One of the things I did back on Tellurian that I found very helpful was creating continuity sheets. I knew I wanted my characters to change a lot over time. Admittedly, it was a rebellious push against the culture of iconic, but I like the idea of characters that change over time, that are affected by their journey. Like I always say, I want to be able to see the story. So continuity sheets help keep track of all the changes that the characters have been going through. I realized that this character has been going through some changes as well, and so I decided to update her model sheet accordingly. Speaking of gesture, to accompany the line, "The end of the world, we are gathering who and what we can," I wanted to communicate the weight of all this on the shipwright's shoulders. So he's standing up, but in this moment I wanted it all to seem very heavy. Meanwhile, with Bastian, as anyone who's had a good dog can tell you, the support he's offering here is just being glad to be here. One of the things that I've been exploring is what I would call the level of resolution of these drawings. There's a great image that, if I can find, I'll put it up here. It shows the difference between the way classic adventure stories were drawn and the way a lot of modern graphic novels are drawn. Attention to detail is great, and every style is a tool meant to solve a certain problem. I would call this a difference in resolution. In the background, I've been planning out more and more future episodes, and the amount of content that I could be working through it's immense. So I'm going to require a certain amount of speed. I want to find the right balance between creating a believable world that feels grounded, but also that I can draw with some amount of swiftness. To that end, I'm using a slightly larger inking brush. This forces me to omit certain details, to simplify. I'm going to continue to experiment with this, so we'll see how it changes over time. As I've said before, I don't mind later episodes looking different than early episodes, as long as it's an improvement. So I really mean what I said about facial expression and telling the story. Some expressions are harder than others because they're communicating a lot. In this case, I want her expression to communicate that she not only doesn't believe what the shipwright is saying, but she's now concerned. The person she had come to believe was safe is maybe not what she thought. So I took the time to sketch out some gestures very loosely, without thinking about proportion or anything like that, just the feeling of the expression. When translating that expression onto the body language is also important to this. So she's clutching the shipwright's cloak closer to her protectively and leaning away. If I can get expression and gesture right, that means I can pull back on the writing. Honestly, as time goes on, I'm hoping for the writing in this project to be only what's necessary. I want it to be fairly lean. One thing that I think helps dialogue is movement. Rather than staying in one place, we show that the story is progressing by literally having the characters progress. I think it's also a way to make a location feel more believable. Having characters explore a place, to touch it, to have to navigate it, to me it makes it feel more tactile, like you really could imagine being there yourself. So originally, you can maybe see from the sketch that I was going to have Bastian carried over the shipwright's shoulders, like a shepherd carrying a sheep. It would be a quick and easy way to carry him, and the shipwright's certainly capable of it. But from a story perspective, this is his panel to speak, and there was no way to draw Bastian over his shoulders that wouldn't obscure his face. If this were animated, spoken in dialogue, we could still get the effect. But in a visual medium, I think it's easier to connect the dialogue to the character when you can actually see who's talking. So instead, I decided to put Bastian's protective harness to use. So he gets to dangle off of the shipwright's belt for a little bit. I'm sure Bastian has done this enough times he doesn't mind one bit. Plus it gives him a chance to scope out what's below. Angled shots like this are definitely challenging, but as always I find it helps to build things up from the foundations. So with some perspective lines, I could start blocking in the geometry of the anatomy. And if you stay faithful to that geometry in the right proportions, it typically seems to work out. Something I didn't mention when I was revisiting the model sheet was when putting the characters together, the height discrepancy between the shipwright and her was quite dramatic, and so I decided to show that they had rolled up and pinned the cloak so that it wouldn't be dragging on the floor. This girl may actually be considered tall by modern standards. She's probably about 5'8", but compared to the shipwright at 7'5", she looks quite tiny. There's one thing that I changed at the end, and you'll see it when it transitions to the final. In her right hand, she's holding the idol that she had been praying to when the shipwright woke up. I decided to change how her hand was posed to make it read more clearly. This expression on the shipwright is probably carrying the most weight in this page. Using as little dialogue as possible, I wanted to imply what the shipwright has gone through over the years. He has tried to convince family, friends, his subjects, and after almost a century, only his immediate family has agreed to come with him. After all this time, he still makes the offer, but it comes with the weight of a century of rejection. So they're reaching the bottom of their elevated campsite. I used a previous drawing to establish the proportions of the statue's feet, how big the characters would be by comparison. I wanted her pose to look inexperienced. She's no climber. She's just holding on for dear life. Meanwhile, Bastian is on the lookout, smelling the air for potential threats. There's so much negative space in this composition that I wanted to use it as a mini establishing shot. We've seen this ruined valley from above, but now they're down at the bottom, and I wanted to show more of these dense structures. So they're all based on models I built. I used them as my pencil layer, and then sketched in where a lot of the overgrowth would have gone. Part of the story I'm telling here is that while some of these kingdoms are vast and powerful, there's also been time for other kingdoms to rise and then fall. While this plays out, working on a story like this, naturally it forces me to think a lot about storytelling. We are living in a very, very weird time. Some of the old story institutions that we thought would be here forever seem to have abandoned their purpose. At the same time, new storytellers are using this opportunity to take their shot. At the time I'm making this video, the movies The Backrooms and Obsession are outperforming a big-budget Disney Star Wars film, helmed by guys in their early 20s. A long time ago, I used the analogy that as old trees in a forest begin to age and crack and fall, sunlight reaches the forest floor again, and young sprouts and seeds are finally able to get the sunlight, money, that they need. So while there's uncertainty and a fair bit of chaos, these are also the exact soil conditions necessary for creating a new forest. I don't know where Dead Gods will go. I'm going to keep drawing it until I'm forced to stop. My plan is to create enough story that I can release book 1, and then move on to book 2. And then we'll see how many books it takes to reach what can safely be called the end. And if, in the course of time, it generates enough attention that it can become animated or filmed, then great. My goal will be to help make sure it's the best version of whatever that is that I can. My job is just to make sure that this seed is planted. Whatever sunshine may fall on it is out of my hands. But I think the exciting thing for all of us is that as these lines get redrawn, the success or failure of these projects is more in our hands than it ever has been. The monoculture is dying. The old gatekeepers can no longer man the gates. We each create our own culture now, based on what we want to watch and what we want to support. So maybe instead of a streaming service, you break up that subscription into a few smaller subscriptions for projects that you believe in, that better reflect the culture that you want. If you would like to help support this project, like, subscribe, share with your friends. You can join me on Patreon and choose what tier of support you're up for. Though I will say, higher tier patrons get access to a private Discord server that's now grown quite substantially. It's filled with people working on their own projects, sharing work and techniques, helping each other out, geeking out about storytelling and history and art. It's slowly filling up with people who are choosing to build their own culture. So I hope it's my project that you choose to support, but if not, go out there and support one that you do believe in. If you like storytelling and you want to support me in a more one-off way, maybe pick up my previous story, Tellurian. There's a link in the description. It's an entirely visual story. No words, told just through pictures. And I like to talk about it frequently because in this age where anyone can start a project, Tellurian is proof that I can finish them. For this last shot, a brief note on writing. I am not a writer. If my project ever gets reviewed more officially by people in the future, I'm very much expecting, I kind of like the art, they're writing, and I'm totally okay with that. This is me learning. One of the things that I've been doing is changing the writing as I go. I probably rewrote this dialogue about 10 times. And I'm not even saying this is finished. Later on, before it goes to publication, I may make some edits still. But it's partly a result of the drawings supporting the storytelling. Sometimes the drawings work out well enough that I don't need to articulate certain things in text. Oftentimes I realize there are more efficient ways to communicate the necessary information. Sometimes there are ways that I can use words that are more evocative. It's been really fun to figure it out as I go, but I will say, as much as I have been thankful for the support of a lot of writers, many have offered their help and support, but this does also feel like something I have to do myself. But I'm very thankful for everyone that's been following along. I can't tell you how much your support, in whatever form, has meant to me. Thanks for watching.